So I just watched two of the most baffling games in the playoffs that I have ever covered, and weirdly enough, there were actually a lot of similarities between them. The Miami Heat and Dallas Mavericks both had games where in the first quarter they somewhat hung around with their team, but it was very clear that they were going to lose in the end. They got absolutely demolished in the second quarter. That continued on in the third quarter, and then for some reason they decided to make a late game push where it's clearly a little bit too late, but they actually do show some signs of life. That happened pretty much verbatim in both of these games back to back, so I guess let's talk about it in further detail. Hello everybody, welcome to Awesome Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already and drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second and it makes a massive difference how this video performs in the YouTube algorithm. Now between these two games and really between these two matchups, I'm just far less interested in Boston versus Miami given the fact that there is no Jimmy Butler. It's pretty clear from the onset that there is just absolutely no way that this team can compete with Boston if they do not have Jimmy. Honestly, I feel as though they probably can't compete with them even with Jimmy. That felt more obvious to me as this game went along, especially because Boston started off absolutely insane. They started off 14-0. From there, Bam Adebayo hit some fadeaway jumpers, and Miami pulled some decent schemes that managed to get them some buckets. I think even Kristaps Porzingis, when they were interviewing him, like in the third quarter, was like, yeah, you got to be prepared for them to pull up some bullshit. It was pretty clear that Boston was the better team in here. Honestly, I also, major note that I made here, I only got about a 1 page of notes because this game really wasn't all that interesting, again, but Tyler Hero, let's not give him shit. I don't actually know what he shot in this game, but I don't think he is deserving of any level of slander for how he performs in this series if there is no Jimmy throughout the duration, because with the defensive abilities that this Boston Celtics have, and him then being forced to be the lead perimeter creating option, it's just an unfair circumstance. Tyler's really not good enough to be that lead creator on a playoff team, especially against one of the best teams in the NBA, who in particular have very strong guard defenders. So whether it's Drew Holiday, whether it's Derek White, whether it's Jaylen Brown, whether it's Jason Tatum, no matter who he's matched up against, he's going to have a very rough time. He did start to hit more shots as the game went along, but for the most part, it was definitely an ugly show. There's just really not enough offense here. It would help if they had Terry Rozier, but he is also not present for Miami. So it's just like if Tyler and Bam do not both put up excellent performances, there's not a shot in hell that they can compete in this matchup. I didn't actually end up covering the play-in game against the Chicago Bulls. It was a little sad because the game before with the Atlanta Hawks, I was like talking them up so much and about how much I enjoyed them just for them to lose to the Heat without Jimmy. In that game, I said if they are going to beat the Bulls, they need a dominant Bam and a dominant Tyler game, and they got that from both of them, or at the very least a dominant Tyler game. Bam's game was all right, but Tyler had, I think, if not a triple-double, a near triple-double, and he shot the ball well. But yeah, other than that, it was just kind of Celtics dominance, doing it in the typical way. Porzingis was kind of getting his shit off. He had a step-back three over Jaime Jaquez. Tatum threw a cross-court pass to Peyton Pritchard, who then did a tip pass to Sam Hauser for a corner three, who I think he started off the first quarter really strong. Really, there's no notes that I wrote down until we get to the fourth quarter, where DeLon Wright hits 5 of 5 from outside, and they're like almost all consecutive shots, if not all consecutive shots, back to back to back to back to back, three-pointer. DeLon Wright's not even a particularly strong three-point shooter. He's had stages of his career where his percentages were all right, but he's just a so-so three-point guy for the most part. Not in this game, though. He was just absolutely on fire, and it actually made it look like there was going to be something interesting to happen in this one, but as I mentioned in the intro, it was a case of being too little too late, and it resulted in an L for Miami. Only thing I want to talk about for the other notes from this game, Kendrick Perkins said some wild shit after this game, and I know that what he said was hyperbole, but there was a degree, I don't know, I'll just say what he said. He said that Miami could shoot 100% from the field and 100% from three, and Boston would still win the series in 4. That's hilarious. But yeah, we're going to move on. Obviously, what Kendrick Perkins said was hyperbole, but it was still absolutely ridiculous. Just like too far. I don't know if hyperbole works that way, but I'm just like, okay, well, obviously not. Moving on. Let's talk about the Clippers Mavericks game. Again, kind of held in there for the first, but the Mavericks had an absolutely dog shit second quarter. They ended up going 2 for 20 in the second quarter, and they finished the game as a whole, or finished the half as a whole, 30 points. And it got to a point where you could tell they just had absolutely zero confidence shooting the ball. There was a Dante Exum corner three where it's like the entire team collapsed because it was like, yeah, that shit's not going in. A couple of different jumpers that like should have been decent looks. Maxi Kleber got a wide open three that just like felt so obviously like it was going to miss. Kyrie threw an absolute dime to Tim Hardaway Jr. under the basket, and then he proceeded to just absolutely whiff a wide open layup. So just absolutely horrible performance from them on the offensive end. Luka Doncic was not good really either. He shot the hell out of the ball, which is really all you can do in this circumstance. But he put up a lot of three-pointers, and they were kind of so-so whether or not they were going in. James Harden actually had a very strong first half, scoring 20 points. He was hitting a bunch of pull-up three-pointers. Got an and one step-back mid-range shot, I believe, towards the end of the second quarter. In general, there was just dominance from the Clippers, and it was on both ends of the floor. Part of it was, again, the Mavericks were just missing open shots, and some of it was just really, really ugly. But the Clippers played a very strong defense, and then their offense was cool. It was nothing special, but for the most part, they were doing their job. Also, I gotta mention Zubats, my twin, or as I think Kenny on Twitter called him, Zoo Cinder. He was really good in this game, got a double-double, a lot of really strong finishes, and most importantly, wasn't really mismatched hunted. And there were a couple of instances where Luka Doncic did manage to get that switch, and he really didn't do much with it. I remember there being a possession where it ended up being a turnover because Maxi Kleber couldn't catch the ball, but Zubats was on Luka for the entire possession, and he just did not give him any kind of advantage. I mentioned him being the X factor in this series for the Clippers, and as far as the first game goes, he more than illustrated that because he was very, very good for them, and it made a very significant impact on the game. Harden, this was at the end of the second quarter, just kind of an exclamation point, threw an alley-oop to Russell Westbrook. Russ also had himself a decent game, hit a three-pointer or two, got that backdoor alley-oop as I expected. In fact, between the two, because Russ scored 10 in the first half, James Harden and Russell Westbrook scored as many points as the Dallas Mavericks did in the entire first half. That's absolutely nuts. Now, going into the third quarter, I'd say in the second half, the Dallas Mavericks probably outperformed the Clippers. Yeah, that's definitely the case. So in quarter three, the Mavericks scored 34 points, which is already more than they scored in the entire first half. The Clippers scored 31, so they beat them by 3 in that quarter, and then they beat them by 11 in the fourth quarter, rather. They just dug themselves into such a significant hole that there was just no way of getting out of it. So it was already too little too late in that regard. It's similar to Miami's performance. But yeah, there's not much to add from there. Tim Hardaway Jr. hit a buzzer-beating three. That was cool. They were down 23 going into the fourth, and it seemed like a comeback could be feasible. And at one point, they got it to be about a 15-point game off of a Luka step-back three. Right before that possession, it looked like he was ready to give up because he missed a floater, and then like he put his head down like he was so dejected. There's one thing you can really criticize Luka Doncic for. His body language can be fucking horrendous sometimes in a way that just like feels like you're telegraphing a loss before it even happens. He was really not the main one to blame for this game. Kyrie Irving really struggled from the field. A lot of his role player teammates just did not hit open shots. I mentioned that Tim Hardaway layup that he just completely whiffed before. Where else? Oh, Harden threw that lob. When he threw that lob backdoor to Russell Westbrook, on the following possession, Luka tried to throw a lob to Derek Lively, but the dunk missed, like trying to match it. It was just a perfect illustration of the way that the game had gone. Also a perfect illustration because that lob to Lively was so much more forced than what the Clippers did. Like, everything the Mavericks did in this game felt like it was forced, and that was in part because of the defense, but also there was just no kind of offensive scheme to be found. Not that Dallas is known for having some super complicated offensive sets, you know, at the most part it is the heliocentric Luka Doncic show with some secondary creation from Kyrie Irving, but I don't know, this one, it was so basic. It was like they were playing street ball, and a lot of this came down to the coaching disparity. It could not have been more clear in this one because the Clippers actually had a game plan. They're playing without Kawhi Leonard, but they managed to look like a well-rounded, well-polished NBA team, despite the fact that they're missing their best player. I guarantee you nothing similar like that would happen in the case of this Mavericks team with Jason Kidd. Honestly, I think Jason Kidd will be the deciding factor in Dallas not going as far as I think they're capable of, and that's something to watch out for. I really hope that he's gone after this season, but of course if they make a deep postseason run, that might all but keep him here. But I do feel like because so many people have favored the Mavericks in this series over the Clippers, especially due to Kawhi Leonard's injury stuff, if they do manage to lose this series, that probably is the end for Jason Kidd, so he's going to want to step that up if he wants to keep his job. As for what this means for the series going forward, what we can project from here for both of these, in the case of the Miami-Boston series, I think it's pretty evident that that's going to be a sweep unless Jimmy just shows up and isn't injured. Like, it's one thing if he plays through an injury, but like if he just showed up and was him, like Himmy Butler the whole way through, then sure, I could see that series getting a little bit more interesting, if not ultimately still falling in Boston's hands. In the case of this one, yeah, this was a very bad start for a series that a lot of people were predicting the Mavericks to win. They don't have the higher seed. They played really good going at the end of the season, while the Clippers finished about 500 after their super big winning streak. So a lot of confidence in the Mavericks, especially expressed by me. Not a good showing in here. I do think the fact that they were able to take that punch in the mouth the way that they did and still manage to make it a somewhat competitive game should be enough of a positive sign that they were able to not just lay down and die from that point, because it would have been very easy to lay down and die at that stage of the game. But as a whole, I still feel good about Dallas in this series, but I don't feel as good about them as I did. Something did change in that regard. This was definitely not a pretty win, and not what we're used to in this matchup in the past, because Luka, if anything, he kind of starts out amazing and then slowly but surely gets less and less impactful as he gets more and more burned out from the carry job. But in the case of this game, right out of the gate looking like he was burned out, and that's definitely very far from ideal. So in between covering these games today, I decided to have just a come to Jesus moment. The reason why this game is, this reaction rather, is going to be a little bit late, coming out in the morning instead of at night like it normally does, is because A, I got tired, and B, I kind of wanted to change a little bit of my approach to how I do this coverage. You might see the direct contrast, or maybe this won't actually make that much of a difference, I don't know. But the note-taking thing, my handwriting sucks ass. I don't know if you guys have actually looked at the notepad, but there's a lot of times where I'm struggling to actually understand what my notes are, so I'm going to write them down physically, but then translate it to a Google Doc with some main overarching notes. So hopefully that will make the coverage a little bit better. But with that said, with that little peek behind the scenes, I want to talk about the Thunder versus Pelicans game, which was really the first close game of the playoffs thus far. Every team has played, or every matchup, there's been one game played thus far. And really, this would not have been the series where I expected that, because the Pelicans, of course, are playing without Zion Williamson. I really do not understand. I mean, I kind of understand historically this team has done a decent job of like putting up a dogfight against teams that they probably have no business with, but like last year, that was against the Phoenix Suns, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure it was, and they had a fully healthy and on fire Brandon Ingram, whereas this time around, Brandon Ingram was actually pretty terrible in this game because he is playing through an injury. He went 5 for 17 from the field, scored 12 points. Definitely a very rough performance from him, but in spite of that, the Pelicans managed to stay in this one. A lot of that thanks to CJ McCollum. He had to take on a brunt of the shot creation when he's normally third in the pecking order. He went from that to first in this one, and I think all things considered, he did a decent job in that shift in role. Of course, he's had this role at times in his career in the past, usually a secondary, but every once in a while he gets this job. He went 9 for 22. You know, that's not the best, but you always have to factor in when we're talking about the playoff that efficiency is just inherently going to be down. I think both of these teams shot sub 45% from the field and sub 32% from three. So that's just kind of the way it goes in the playoffs, and I think CJ did damn well. There were a couple of really clutch plays from him late, but we're going to get to that later because I also want to section off the last 5 minutes into its own thing. As for some more takeaways from the Pelicans, I really want Larry Nance to play more over Jonas Valanciunas. It honestly feels as though to me that Jonas is just the X factor in this series. I've talked about it before. He wasn't bad in this game, and he also was not bad in the play-in game against the Sacramento Kings. It's not like he's just a guaranteed L every time, but to me it definitely felt like they were better with Larry Nance on the floor, and it definitely seemed like the Pelicans were in agreement with me on that one because Larry Nance was the guy who closed the game for them. They played similar-ish minutes, but Nance to me is just a more versatile defender and a more versatile offensive player. Even though Valanciunas has shown signs of shooting threes in the past, I feel like Nance is a little bit better at it. More agile in the pick and roll. I talked about in the past where like when Valanciunas rolls to the basket, he usually just ends up getting post position out of it instead of it actually being a genuine roll to the rim. And there were a couple of cases in this game, one pick and roll in particular between him and CJ that was just beautifully ran, like a perfect pick and roll. Ended up with Nance just wide open running to the basket, and CJ made a really nice pass to him for the dunk. He also had some really strong defensive possessions in this one, two in particular that stand out to me. He had a possession where he got stuck on SGA for pretty much the entirety of the shot clock. There was like at least 18 seconds on the clock when the switch happened, and SGA was just locked up for 90% of the possession, and then he kind of just foul baited and got, bailed out, which is something that people complain about with SGA. I think foul baiting and like in general guys who get to the free throw line a lot, I think that is something that a lot of people overblow, but in that case I was pretty pissed off because I watched Larry Nance play great defense for the entire possession just for SGA to get rewarded with it. He also ripped SGA later in the fourth quarter in a pivotal play. Obviously the Thunder ended up winning this game, but it almost looked like the Pelicans were going to do it, and part of that was because of the defense that Nance was playing. In fact, if we're going to talk about the last couple of minutes here, the Thunder went scoreless for 5 straight minutes of the last 7 in the fourth quarter, and a lot of that was the Pelicans were just locking the fuck up. Also, some Thunder offense being kind of so-so. Their offense is a little simplistic, although simplistic with principles, which I think is different. I think that's something that you should factor in where, there's probably 5 different ways a possession can end for the Thunder, but they're all solid and they're all reliable. So at the bare minimum, you're generally creating good looks very often. Of course, they're the number 1 slashing team in the league, and I believe if not that, literally the number 1 slashing team of all time in terms of pure volume, lots of drive and kick and stuff like that. And there just were not a lot of open opportunities off of this for them in that fourth quarter. Other stuff for the Pelicans, big Trey Murphy game. He had 21 points, hit 4 3-pointers. He also got in on the block party. Another big defensive possession that they had was he blocked a Shai Gilgeous jumper late in the fourth quarter. He finished with 3 blocks in total on the game. That's pretty much everything I have to say for them. I think they did literally everything they could in the context of this game. I also feel like Herb Jones did a decent job defending SGA, although SGA did have a pretty typical Shai game, 28 points, a little bit worse efficiency, but as I mentioned with CJ, that's just kind of how it's going to go in the regular season. The other thing to watch for the Thunder was what happens in the Josh Giddey minutes, and in particular, Aaron Wiggins and Cason Wallace and them playing in those minutes. That's something that I talked about a lot going into not just this series, but the playoffs in general. I do think that slowly but surely, Josh Giddey is going to be cut from the rotation. I got a little bit of pushback on that, and a couple of Thunder fans and a couple of, actually, I think it's more common for non-Thunder fans to have this take, because a lot of Thunder fans kind of know what the deal with Giddey is. I'm really good friends with 3-Cone, Alex Hoops as well. Both of them are Thunder fans, and both of them agree with me that Josh Giddey is probably just not a big-time playoff rotation guy, at least at this stage of his career. Maybe there's things that can be developed further. Maybe his 3-ball starts to be a little bit more reliable, but at least at this stage, not a super positive defensive defender. Scoring inside the three-point line is okay, and then his three ball is not. But he ended up playing 19 minutes in this one, which was easily the least amount of minutes of any starter. And then between Kaysen and Wiggins played 16 minutes, Kaysen played 19. Both of them hit some catch and shoot three-pointers. Kaysen hit one out of the corner, which is like, I feel like he shoots 80% on corner threes. Aaron Wiggins also got a really big and one. So yeah, they also closed the game. I can't remember if it was Aaron or Kaysen. I think it was Aaron, but they closed the game with the size, with the more reliable three-point shooting, with the defense, and I think that's just the better route to go for OKC, and it clearly worked for them in this case, and it seems like Mark Daigneault agrees with me on that one. Chet Holmgren, huge in this game. His offense was so-so. He had his moments. He hit a fadeaway over Valanciunas that was really pretty. He hit a three-pointer in transition, I think, towards the start of the game, but really it was his defensive impact. Obviously, that's the main thing that stands out about Chet. As much as he does have offense to his name, he ended up being second in blocks this year, just behind Wemby, both of them leading the league in blocks as rookies, which has never happened before. But he had 5 blocks in this game, a really, really huge one in the last couple of minutes of the game on Larry Nance. As much as I've been singing his praises, he went up for a layup that was honestly pretty easy for Chet to block, but nevertheless, he made sure to get as much out of it by just absolutely slapping it. Typical SGA game. That's about it. I feel like this is Gen Z's team. I really like the OKC Thunder a lot, and they're so young. They're the youngest first seed in NBA history. I feel weird saying this every time because I am technically Gen Z, even though I look 40 years old. I am older Gen Z, but yeah, I just feel the youthful energy of this team. Just a bunch of 20 to 25-year-olds who absolutely kick ass at basketball. They have the whole post-game interview thing that they do together, which I think is really fun. They did play down to their competition a little bit. SGA was talking about that in the post-game interview. He didn't say that explicitly because it's a little condescending to the Pelicans, but he was like, yeah, we didn't really execute exactly how we wanted to, but we got to win. That's all you can really ask for. I do feel like if you're the Pelicans, you can feel pretty solid going forward into this series, all things considered, but I think we can all agree this is more likely going to be over rather quickly if Zion does not come back, which it doesn't appear as though he will. Other notable things from this, like I mentioned, CJ hit some big shots. He hit a spin fade around the free throw line where he lost the ball as he was doing it, but as he was spinning back, he kind of brought the ball up as he was fumbling it and then shot it, still went in. Hit a baseline fadeaway over SGA in the last minute of the game. From there, it just kind of became the free throw game. Chet split a pair, which made it just a 2-point game. CJ had a shot. He had a good look to win the game, a three-pointer off of the inbound. His defender ended up behind him. Didn't go in, though. Very close. Very, very close to this being a Pelicans win, but alas, OKC pulled away with it. We're going to move on to the Bucks versus Pacers. Obviously, yet another series, unfortunately, where like a star player is missing. It really feels like that all started to hit right in time for the playoffs, because in general, I feel like this has been a year that's been pretty good injury-wise. You know, no superstar players, at least unless I'm just blanking on one, that have dealt with major injuries. Joel Embiid missing a chunk of the season was pretty much the only guy. Otherwise, all the top guys played, even like Kawhi, Anthony Davis, Zion, they all played like 70 games this year. Guys who are known for just perpetually missing time, so the fact that they didn't was absolutely huge. And in general, really felt like that was going to mean a relatively healthy playoffs, but here we are, no Kawhi in the Clippers, no Zion in the Thunder Pelicans series, no Giannis, at least to start this series. At least in the case of Giannis and Kawhi, there's a decent chance they're going to come back, whereas the Zion thing's kind of up in the air. Also, no Jimmy Butler in the Miami Heat Celtics series, so that's kind of an L, and no Giannis in this one, but at the very least, Damian Lillard decided to take full advantage of the fact that he was first in the pecking order, because he scored 35 points in the first half, and he was doing it in typical Damian Lillard fashion. He hit a bunch of crazy-ass threes, felt like they got more crazy as things progressed, hit a buzzer-beating step back at the end of the first quarter over Nembhard. He got an and one three-pointer over him as well on the left elbow, where he just kind of like was staring at him, and then he just fucking shot it and it went in. So yeah, 6 threes in the first half, 35 points in the first half. Didn't do jack shit in the second half. Zero points. Didn't matter, obviously, as they still got the W. Kind of wild to just do like, you know what, I'm going to go off for this half, and in the second half, I'm just going to do some cardio. It's actually, my dad pointed this out to me in text, so credit to him. Reminiscent of Michael Jordan in the 1992 NBA Finals Game 1 against the Portland Trailblazers, where he infamously did the shrug. 35 points in the first half, 6 3-pointers. He did score 4 in the second half instead of 0, unlike Damian Lillard, but otherwise a pretty remarkably similar situation. 35 first half points, 6 threes. Obviously, Dame hitting 6 threes is far less ridiculous than Michael Jordan doing it. At the end of the day, cool similarity there. And in fact, 35 points from him, just 5 points away from the overall NBA playoff record for points in a half. In case you were curious, the record is 39 points to Sleepy Floyd. I believe he set that in 88, some point in the 80s. And then Charles Barkley and Kevin Durant, second place, both having 38-point halves. Kevin Durant got that during the Warriors era. I don't remember the specific game. Barkley, that was in a round 1 against, I think, the Portland Trailblazers. But anyways, moving on beyond the record stuff from Dame, obviously that was huge. But in the second half of the game, it really became Chris Middleton's show. They started the game off getting him a couple of post-ups that went well, but after that, as Dame got hotter and hotter, the ball just kept finding him, as you would expect. But Middleton carried the second half, and he finished with a pretty impressive box score. You know, nothing absolutely outlandish, but like a Chris Middleton game. And that was something that we were worried about going into this series. Like, what exactly is Chris Middleton going to bring to the table? How good does he actually look? Because he was gradually getting better as the season got along, but he would still regularly have some stinkers. And just in general, you know, how is that going to translate to the playoffs? Is he actually back? Looks to me like he might actually be back. And frankly, my main takeaway here for the Bucks, if Dame can carry this energy even a little bit with Giannis present, if Middleton is back for real, and they play defense in the way that they played in this game, which I'll get to when I talk about the Pacers' performance in this one, the Bucks could be a lot scarier than we initially thought. And this was something that I hypothesized, was like, what if Dame just turns it on when the postseason goes around? Because of course, playoff Dame is a thing that he is known for what it's worth. Actually kind of hit or miss as to whether or not Damian Lillard really shows up in a playoff series, but when he shows up, he shows the fuck up, no doubt. He makes it hard to ignore him. But honestly, I think the main reason why he struggled this year, on top of the fact that it's a new environment, you know, he's going through stuff in his personal life, he's living literally in a new place, and he spent the last decade of his life living. Other than those factors, it's been that he just doesn't play as well with Giannis, and I think that they should change up their scheme to alter that, because to me, it feels like Damian Lillard should be utilized in the offense as though he is the first option. Obviously, he's not who you want necessarily a majority of your offense coming from, maybe a large percentage of it. I feel like Giannis is going to get his regardless of how the offensive scheme treats him, whereas Dame, it's kind of the opposite. He needs the scheme to be like, hey, Dame, do Dame shit right now. And if Dame's not doing Dame shit, he kind of falls to the wayside, becomes a catch and shoot option where he's fine, does a decent amount of creation. You know, he still gets to like 23, 24 points. That's cool and all, but I feel like if the scheme was like, hey, Dame's our first option, Giannis is our second, Giannis is getting these easy buckets off of the Dame action, I don't know, I feel like that would work better. Not to suggest that the Bucks, whether it's through Doc Rivers or I'm blanking. What's the other guy? Oh God, I also can't snap, so I'm just doing this with my fingers. Adrian Griffin. Whether it was those two, I'm not suggesting that they were not running plays for Dame, but it also feels like Giannis is first and foremost the most important thing in the scheme, which I agree with because he's better than Damian Lillard. But I don't know. I feel like you get Dame more involved, even if it means a little bit less production from Giannis. If you get a more involved Dame, that trade-off is worth it. And hopefully that's something that they can actually get going. Last note, as for the Bucks specifically, great Brook game, really good defense, got a couple of blocks, 3 of them, poster dunk on Aaron Nesmith. Also at the end of the second quarter, I think there were like 2 minutes left, he hit a deep three-pointer off of the catch at the top of the key. Felt like he wanted to get in on the action that Damian Lillard was doing because he was hitting a ton of deep threes, as you expect. But to talk about the Indiana Pacers, first things first, they started Andrew Nembhard in this one, which I think was a defensive tactic, going a little bit smaller in here with a small guard next to Halliburton, making Halliburton ostensibly the two guard. I'm expecting Miles Turner to do all of the big man shit, which I don't know if necessarily is the strongest move, but with no Giannis, I do understand that approach. I definitely only think they're breaking out this lineup with no Giannis, otherwise they're going to want a bigger body out there. But I imagine they made that approach for the perimeter defense specifically because he's a really solid perimeter defender, probably their best one if it's not Aaron Nesmith. But regardless of who it is between the two, I thought Nesmith might be the better option just because he's bigger, but Andrew's probably a little bit more agile and can keep up with Dame, not to mention more used to defending that style of player. So I think that made sense. The Bucks not having, I forgot to mention this, not having Giannis, they started Patrick Beverley, which I thought was an interesting choice. I don't know how good of a game he actually had. It was like fine. I think he hit a three-pointer, played some defense as Patrick does. But in general, very rough first half for the Pacers. They really struggled to actually, live up to their name, the Pacers being the top pace team in the entire NBA. The Bucks were making them play at their pace on both ends of the floor. And Indiana, not as strong in the half court. And famously, that's a really important part of a postseason offense, is you need to be able to execute in the half court. And don't get me wrong, Indiana is still a good half-court offense, but a lot of their offense comes from just being really fast and getting shots up quickly and having strong three-point shooters and attacking just quickly. Milwaukee was getting back on defense very well. They were also, it was doing their offense at a slower pace, which I feel like that almost rubs off on teams as they kind of start to match each other. And the postseason in general, things just slow down because you're trying to make less mistakes. But Indiana kind of got on their head. They were playing flustered. Big part of this, of course, is that Halliburton has been pretty terrible ever since he has returned from injury, like the last 30 games of the season or so. His stats just dropped dramatically as a result of that. He ended up this end of the season averaging like 20 points per game as a result, when he was at like 24 and 12 to start the year. But yeah, he wasn't very good in this one. He did shoot efficiently on the 7 shots he took, but of course you want your star player taking more than 7 shots. Finished with 9 points, 7 rebounds, and 8 assists, which is, it could be worse, but it's definitely not a good Halliburton game. Really, the only guy that was working for Indiana, and this is why they traded for him, Pascal Siakam was awesome in this one. Scored 19 points in the first half, finished with 36 in general on 60% shooting. And the reason for this, he's used to the slower playoff pace. He has this experience. He's also used to playing with a slower pace in general because the Raptors, I haven't looked this up, but I'm almost certain they were one of the lower paced teams in the league for the past couple of years, even though he's known for like his fast break, spin moves, and all that. In general, I feel like Pascal is a half-court player. Lots of mid-range shots, lots of attacking of the rim that went well. He looked super comfortable, super composed, no issues whatsoever. Can't say the same for pretty much anybody else with Indiana. Just about everybody else struggled in this game. As I mentioned, Tyrese. Miles Turner was dog shit in this one. 17 points on 17 shots. I believe he made 4 or 5 of those 17 shots, and it really seemed like he was going to brick every time. He hit a 3 on the right elbow, I think at about the third quarter mark, and I was like, holy shit, he made one. Like that's the way that the game felt. And then he proceeded to brick like 4 straight shots to close the quarter. But hey, you did hit 1 3-pointer. Good job, Miles. Feels weird to me because I don't know if I've ever mentioned this before, but when I went to the Summer League, I was on a train that Miles was on, and I just sat like right next to him, and I was just like, yeah, that's Miles Turner. I'm not gonna bother him. I'm not gonna go, hey Miles, what's up?
I know who you are.
But I was just like, yeah, it's fucking Miles Turner. Also made me feel really short. For those who may not know at home, I'm 6'3", but I was standing next to this dude. I was like, holy shit, I'm a baby. That tangent aside, the whole point of these notes was to be more focused, and I just went on that. But regardless, TJ McConnell doing way too much. I think he was trying to make up for the fact that Halliburton really just had no scoring aggression in this one. 10 points on 13 shots. The worst of it was when he got an open 3-pointer at the top of the key, and then he took it, and it was the ugliest. He looked so uncomfortable. And then there was an offensive rebound. Lo and behold, he's wide open at the top of the key yet again. same shot, same ugly ass form, same like, oh, zero shot that's going in. Bricks it yet again. Could not believe that he took it the second time, because I would have had zero confidence to take that shot after the first one. For what it's worth, again, this was almost all the shot creation that they had at a certain point because of Halliburton's lack of scoring aggression, because Milwaukee was locking up as well as they were. There were some moments where he hit some big shots, but in general, it was like, dude, if you're gonna have TJ McConnell carry your offense, we might as well not play the next couple of games in this series. For what it's worth, the offense picked up in the second half. They went on a good run to start, 14-4, I believe. They looked less flustered. They looked less scared. They looked a little bit more like they actually belonged there. Was not enough for a comeback, but it was at the very least enough that you can feel better going into game 2 and feel like you're less likely to just get absolutely destroyed in the first half as they did. Other notable plays, Malik Beasley hit a pair of corner threes in the fourth quarter as Indiana was starting to close the gap, and that kind of put him away. And honestly, every time Malik Beasley is open, if he hits an open catch and gets an open catch and shoot, I'm like, oh yeah, that's going in. That's obviously just going to go in. Didn't feel the same about him on the Lakers, but he seemed to have learned how to shoot again on the Bucks. Pat Connaughton, open three-pointer, or not an open three-pointer rather, and one three-pointer on the break in the first quarter. That was huge. Middleton threw a lob to Bobby Portis where he kind of caught it at a weird angle and had to go up for a layup, but he got like this acrobatic, like throwing it over his head off of the oop finish that was really cool. But yeah, I think that's all my notes about this one. I wrote at the bottom, are the Pacers a pace merchant team? Who knows? Maybe we'll see that they just, when they're forced to be more of an half-court offense, that they aren't even actually that special of an offense. We'll see. Again, a lot of this is predicated on the Halliburton injury stuff. You know, how good is he actually going to play throughout the rest of the series? Who knows? But yeah, that's it. Shout out to Rudy for editing this video, and goodbye. Holy shit, that's a 25-minute recording.